Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about the RF 24-105 f4 lens. Okay, so we're talking about this lens right here today, the 24-105 f4 RF lens, and this is an L lens, so you're getting that premium build, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. One of the main reasons that I love this lens is that it's pretty compact. So, and that's, of course, that's relative, but for full frame 24-105 f4 with a constant aperture like that, I would consider this to be compact and very light too. I used to shoot with a Nikon 24-120 f4 lens, and that was definitely heftier and larger than this. I believe that this weighs in at about 1.5 pounds, and comparing it to, you know, another lens like the 15-35, let me try to hold it side by side for you guys. So that's what it's going to look like on your camera. So it's actually interesting because it's not that much smaller than the 15-35, and you'd think there would be a larger size difference, but I think that's really speaking to how awesome this 15-35 is and how light and compact this lens is. I think the 15-35 is about 1.8 pounds. Back to the 24-105, which is what we're doing this video about. In terms of price for this lens, you can find this lens used for about $1,100, and used, I believe I saw it for about $950 to $1,000, which is a decent price for a lens like this. And in the past, I would probably say that you'd be overpaying if you were paying for a 24-105 for about, you know, $900 to $1,000. Ideally, you want to try to buy this lens in a kit with your camera. You're going to be saving a decent amount of money. I remember when I bought this with the Canon EOS RP a while back, I think I got the whole package for about $1,500, which to me is a steal. So I would generally tend to say that you'd want to avoid paying full price for this if you can. Maybe if you can find it used, go for it then, or wait for it to drop in price a little bit. So there are going to be people who get this in a kit with their Canon camera and they really don't see the value in it, or it just doesn't work for their you know, their style of work. So some of those people will actually be selling this for a decent price just because they got a good deal on it in the first place. So look out for those deals online. And like I said, try to avoid paying full price for this. That being said, I think that the quality of this lens is really amazing. And it's not something that I could have said for the Nikon 24-120 f4 in the past. I love that lens, but I wasn't seeing the same type of lens quality that I see in this lens. I could just tell when I started taking pictures with this lens that it was a professional piece of glass, and you know, the Canon didn't really skimp out on any areas with this. So inside the lens, when you're looking at the glass, this does feature Canon's air sphere coating and super spectra coating, which will help with ghosting and flare. You're also getting a bunch of other awesome features with this lens since it's an L lens, so you're getting the weather sealing. You're also getting the Nano USM, which is a really nice, quiet, and really fast autofocus. That's really ideal for photography and video. And of course, with all of the Canon RF lenses, you're going to get that control ring at the top that you can customize. I would say that the build quality is consistent with the you know, top-notch build quality that you get on all of the other RF L series lenses. And one other nice little touch that they added to this lens is that while you have the standard AF to MF switch and the image stabilization switch on the lens, you also have a lock so you can lock the focal range so it doesn't shift on you while you're walking around or in the middle of a session. One of the primary reasons why I think that you should get this lens if you have the R6 or the R5 is for the added image stabilization that you get. So I think by itself the lens will give you up to 5 stops of image stabilization, but when paired with the R6 or the R5, you're getting up to 8 stops of image stabilization. Personally, I've found that when I'm backpacking, hiking, or just doing landscape photography in general, this really comes in handy because there's certain situations where I don't need to bring my tripod with me. Another reason that I like this lens is when paired with my Canon EOS R, it's nice to have that extra reach when you're shooting in 4K just because of the crop factor. So, you know, I'm able to get decent wildlife shots when shooting in 4K with that lens. So even though there's a lot of people that consider this to be too slow being an f4 lens, I would say personally that I think this is an essential lens. When I'm going into a situation where I know there's going to be a bunch of different types of scenarios that I'm going to run into for my photography needs, I'm always going to go for this lens. If you're looking for a travel lens, I would say this is definitely the one, just because you're going to be covering a 5 times focal length range. You're going to have that weather resistance if you are out shooting in the rain or snow. You can pack lighter, so that means that you don't have to bring as many lenses with you, which also means that you can probably fit all of your camera gear into your carry-on and you don't have to check it in. It's going to be great if you're focusing on architecture or portraits, especially at that 85 to 105 focal length range. If you set it to f4, you're still going to be getting nice separation between your subject and your background. Obviously, this lens having the ability to go to 24 millimeters is going to make it a great landscape lens too. A lot of the time when I'm doing landscape photography, I'm not worried about opening up the aperture wider than f4 anyways, unless I'm doing astrophotography, which you can do with this lens. You can get away with an f4 aperture, but you know, I don't really find myself using this lens for those purposes. So the f4 isn't really much of a limitation to me when it comes to landscape. And when you set this to 105, you can get pretty decent close-up shots. Another reason that this range is awesome is because you don't have to worry about switching lenses in harsh weather conditions. So if you want to protect your sensor, keep it from getting dirty, you are definitely going to be less likely to have to switch out lenses if you have this focal length range. And even though the 105 millimeter focal length range isn't ideal for wildlife, you can still get decent wildlife shots in certain situations, depending on the animal and your environment. So personally, when I'm traveling or going backpacking, I'll take this lens, the 24 to 105, and the 15 to 35 with me. And I will be set, and there's no desire for me to bring anything else. And I do think that a couple other of genres of photography that this lens will shine in quality and value especially are studio and event photography. Obviously, you're gonna run into some situations where the f4 aperture isn't gonna be wide enough to gather enough light for your environment. So in those low light situations, you might struggle a little bit more, but I would argue to say that when paired with the R6 or the R5, getting up to 8 stops of image stabilization kind of counters that need for a wider aperture in certain situations. So any situations where your subjects aren't moving. So if you're taking portraiture where you know your subject's going to be really still, or you're taking landscape shots in a low light environment, the 8 stops of image stabilization is really going to help for that. Also, in high contrast environments, you might notice a little bit of that lateral CA, but it's not going to be substantial, and it's not really anything that's going to affect your overall image. And it's easily corrected in Lightroom. The one other drawback for this lens is that you know, at 24 millimeters wide open, you're going to get a decent amount of vignetting. But again, it's pretty easily corrected in Lightroom. This is something that I noticed with my RF 15 to 35 as well when I set it to 15 at the maximum aperture. there's a decent amount of vignetting. So it's something that I wish that the RF lenses addressed a little bit more, but overall it's easy enough to work with. So closing thoughts for this lens, if you don't have it, I would seriously consider adding it to your kit. I think you really will be surprised about how often you reach for this lens, just because of that, the focal length range, the build quality, and the fast and quiet autofocus. It's just going to be really functional for a lot of different situations. Again, if you can, try to find a deal on this lens used, but I think that is pretty much it for this video today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and definitely subscribe below if you enjoyed this content.